All right, in this lesson, we're going to be looking at lesson 9.2, adding like fractions. Now, like fractions is meaning that they have the same denominator. And it's something that I know you guys have been doing since fourth grade. However, we are going to add one extra step to it, and our numerator is going to be greater than our denominator, causing us to have an improper fraction, which then we need to write as a mixed number. So let's look at this right away. We won't spend a crazy amount of time on it because you have some background, but I want to make sure we get some good practice. So, example one, the length across the bell or top of a mushroom jellyfish is about 5/6 of a foot. If two mushroom jellyfish were placed side by side, what would the combined length be? Well, because they both have the same denominator, 5/6 or 6 as a denominator, I can add them and say, well, 5 plus 5 would be 10, and I keep the same or keep the denominator. We do not say that this is 10/12. That would be totally wrong, right? We don't add the denominator. We simply add the numerator and say, well, that's going to be 10, and it stays out of 6. So if we were to put them side by side, we'd have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So there are 10 1/6 tiles altogether, and so that shows it is 10/6. And so we need to now turn this into a mixed number. So to do that, we're going to look at it and say, well, 6 goes into 10 once, and what is left over? Well, there are 4, and we keep our denominator 6. Well, that's not what we see here. I see 1 2/3. Well, here is where we then have to apply what we already know and say, well, both 4 and 6 are even, so I can factor out a 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 6 divided by 2 is 3. And I don't forget my whole number here, and it's going to be 1. Now I have my mixed number. So if we were to look at it another way, again, we have 5 plus 5, and this is more of a uh, uh, computational, just writing straight up addition. 5 plus 5 is 6. Because they have the same denominator, I can write that up in the numerator. 5 plus 5 is 10. 10 over 6. Well, 10 goes, or 6 goes into 10 once. Again, we get back to our 4/6. I simplify because we always have it in simplest form, and we get 1 2/3. And as a quick recap, if I wanted to take this and turn it back to an improper, I would want to say, well, I go around the horn, is what I've said it before, right? 3 times 1, so I'm going to take my denominator. I'm going to take my denominator, and I'm going to multiply it by the whole number. Then I add the numerator. So 3 times 1 is 3. Then I add the numerator to that, 2, and I get 5. So I would have 5 over 3, which if I were to say, well, 3 goes into 5 once, what's left over? 2, and I keep my denominator here, 3. But where does that come back to saying I had 10/6 earlier? Well, think about this. If I were to multiply this by 2, 5 times 2 is 10, 3 times 2 is 6, and I'm back to my 10/6. That's how this all kind of circles together, and our numbers still work. Let's look at another example here. The table shows how much a book Teddy read each day. What fraction of the book did Teddy read altogether on Tuesday and Thursday? So on Tuesday, Teddy read, well, we're going to look at this and say, well, he read 4/10 of a book. And then on Thursday, he read 2/10. So I can add these because they have the same denominator, 4 plus 2. 4 plus 2 is 6. And so 6/10 works out to be my answer. But I need to identify that 6/10, they are both even, right? 6 and 10. So I can factor out a 2. So when I factor out a 2, I'm writing it in simplest form. 6 divided by 2 is 3. 10 divided by 2 is 5. So Teddy read 3/5 of the book on Tuesday and Thursday. Let's do a couple more here, and then I'll let you get started on some practice. So write the sum in simplest form. Keep in mind, you're writing it in simplest form. So 1/7 plus 3/7, because they each have the same denominator, it's going to be 7. I can simply add my numerator straight across. 1 plus 3 is 4. 4 and 7 don't share any other common factors other than 1, so it is in simplest form. Now, 1/4 plus 1/4. Well, because they each have 4 as a denominator, 4 is my denominator, 1 and 1 is 2. 2/4. Now I need to identify, well, I can simplify that by factoring a 2 out, simplifying it. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 4 divided by 2 is 2. And that should be clear that 2/4 is half of, or 2 is half of 4. So 2/4 is equal to 1/2. All right, go ahead and you can move on to your practice homework pages. If you need a little bit more work, keep following along. I'll keep doing a few more examples here, but I'm going to jump down to number 9. All right, so let's look at number 9. I have denominator 8 and 8, so I can add, it's going to be out of 8, 3 plus 1, I can add straight across, and I get 4. But 4/8, I can simplify that. Now, if I identify they're both even, and I factor out a 2, 4 divided by 2 is 2, 8 divided by 2 is 4. But I am not done because I should also identify, well, those are both even. So I divide each one by 2, and 2 divided by 2 is 1, 4 divided by 2 is 2, so this works down to be 1/2. I could have done that from the very beginning and factored a 4 out of each because 4 is the greatest common factor of 4 and 8. So if I factored a 4 out, I'd end up with 1/2 right away. 3/4 plus 1/4, well, I have 4 and 4, so it's going to be out of 4 still. 3 plus 1 is 4. Well, 4/4 is a whole, so I can say 4/4, or it could simply be 1. And likewise, 4/9 plus 5/9. Again, they each share a common the common denominator of 9. 4 plus 5 is 9, so 9/9, or it can be simply 1. All right, go ahead, move on to the homework practice page. Let me know if you have any questions.